creativity is human nature. And when we suppress our creativity, we're suppressing our own nature. We are all designed to create. We have intuition and imagination, which are portals to other dimensions where we can tap into new
Yes.
ideas, right?
Yes.
And then
James,
we
speak. Yes.
and we think of art like, oh, it's an oil painting or it's a watercolor or it's a sonnet. Well, these are all just forms of art. Art is anything that you can imagine and bring to life with the power of your own creativity and ingenuity. That could be a business, could be a podcast, an awesome dinner party, could be a relationship. And relationship is something that you build and create and nurture in
Mm.
the same way that you create art. Even your career, the decisions you make in your career, are you making them out of fear or are you making them out of curiosity and exploration? So for me, creativity at its core is the sovereignty of consciousness. Because what's the opposite of creativity? It's reactivity. Are you reacting to everything that's happening around you
Mhm.
and just following the crowd and following the orders of a broken society? Or are you tuning into your own intuition to see what your soul wants to birth into reality?
Mm.
So for me, the new renaissance is all of us reclaiming that sovereignty of our own consciousness
Mm.
so we can build new solutions.
James McCrae, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to finally have you on the pod. Welcome to Fire and Soul.
Thanks, Michelle. So good, so happy to be here.
Oh, it's so cool. We were chatting, obviously, before I hit record, and we're going to definitely move into all things New Year, New Renaissance, which I know has your heart. But there's something that snagged my soul as I was in my preparation for this conversation. And it was a conversation that you had on the New Age Sage podcast recently. And there's a whole clip that, so we don't need to go too much into it, but I have to start here because it lit me up. And it was one of your favorite quotes by Buckminster Fuller about changing the world, not to fight the existing system, obviously to create a new model. And that's so much of the energetics that I'm feeling into for this, I believe, what will be pivotal year. But would you be willing to expand on that for my listeners that maybe one of the few that do not follow you yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So the quote, I'll try to remember exactly how it goes, but it's something like, you can't change the world by fighting against the existing reality. If you want to change the world, you have to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete.
Mm.
And I think that's true in so many ways. For me, what that means is it's it's a it speaks to the power of imagination and creativity.
Mm.
And it also speaks to how, the energy and the thoughts and the actions that we put out into the world have a ripple effect around us. So in other words, if you're going to fight against something, you're putting the ripple effect that you're putting out into the world is one of anger and being
Mm.
combative. And I believe, I'm sort of a Buddhist. I'm a kind of sort of an unofficial Buddhist. And I sort of believe that, when we, anger creates more anger
Yeah.
and hate creates more hate. So there's so much in the world that I would like to change, that I'm sure you would like to change, that all of the listeners would like to change.
Mm.
And for me, it's not about fighting against the things we want to change. It's about being a living embodiment for the world that we want to see
Oh.
and letting our energy and our thoughts and our creativity and our art and our actions
Mm.
and our social media content and all of it create a ripple effect around us.
Mm.
I think that's how real change is made. It's like, one of the things that I'm best known for is making memes.
Mm.
And memes are the literal definition of a meme is a viral idea.
Mm.
And the right idea, we're all carrying memes and spreading memes every day, whether we realize it or not.
Mm.
Your interactions with people, both online and in real life, those actions are perpetuating one meme or another. So I try to, as best I can, perpetuate memes in my own life of love and compassion and
Mhm.
acceptance and forgiveness and gratitude.
Mm.
And I actually learned the other day an interesting um, fact about the etymology of the word protest. Because I think
Mm,
right now we think of the word protest as you go out in the street and you're angry about something and you are marching against what you don't want.
yeah.
And the literal word for protest, the literal definition is from the Latin pro, meaning in favor of, and testis, which means to declare or witness. So
Mm.
the actual literal definition of protest is to declare or witness that which you are in favor of.
Ah, so good.
So for me, that's the role of artists and creatives to plant those visions that we want to see and being living embodiments of the world that we want to inhabit.
So rich, yeah. And it so spoke with me because there's been a real shift as we continue to see, right? It's like the Russian dolls and people's perception of reality and really knowing ourselves and how to hear those calls or whispers of our soul to know our own truth, right? And then how can we be collaborative has been so important. But one of the shifts that I've noticed recently, especially on the gram, which is where you play the most, I believe, um, is truth is coming out so hard and almost yes against anything else. And I'm like, ooh, this feels very much like what we are all evolving out of and away from, right? Or really just integrating because we can't fully escape it. We are here. So I appreciate that because I think that that's really good medicine to kick us off, especially into the new year. Yeah. One of the questions that I had for you, because I don't know a ton about your backstory, but I know that you were Madison Avenue, New York, corporate career as a graphic artist turned, meme making poet, author, podcaster, guide of a global community, that you are on the pulse of what I believe humanity needs to hear, needs to know we're not alone in, and how you describe and how you share with such divine, intuitive timing. But most people don't know how to escape, right? The corporate career trap. Can you walk us through or share anything that feels relevant and alive today, how that actually happened and what could leave a clue for others, a cheat code, as you like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, for me, the key word that comes to mind is surrender.
Mm,
And I'll start by saying that I never felt completely at home in that corporate world. And I think that so many of us don't, even if we find ourselves there. There's something sort of unnatural about it. And, for me, I grew up as an artist, as a poet.
mm,
And I sort of feel like I snuck into the business world through the back door because I was just trying to be an artist, and I actually didn't go to college right away because I was just wanting to paint and write and things like that.
mm,
And eventually I thought, well, I should probably go to college and like get some more direction and some semblance of a career path, even if it's something that's creative. So I went to an art school and I went to study graphic design. And then it was through graphic design that I started working in the advertising industry. So that was kind of my foot in the door.
mhm,
And then from there, I kind of spread my wings a little bit and decided I wanted to do more writing and do more strategic thinking and big picture thinking. So I
mhm,
became a brand strategist. And I spent a number of
mm.
years as a brand strategist, leading a branding team in New York City. Um,
I want to pause there for a second because you're
yeah,
smiling and you're looking away.
yeah.
And I bet you're remembering what that was like because I've heard you share about what a gigantic risk that was for others who said, don't do that. But you
Yeah.
chose to answer the call. So I want to speak to that thread just for a moment.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in taking risks and doing things that don't seem like the thing you should do if it's the thing that your heart really wants you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that told me, "Oh, you're a designer, you're a creative, like don't try to be a strategist. It's a whole different job and you don't know anything about it."
Mm,
And it was the same with like moving to New York City. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and when I moved to New York City, people were advising me against it, and it was a rough transition. But I've
mm,
always believed in just following your own heart and following the beat of your own drummer,
mm,
even if it's not conventional, even if it's not accepted. because I think that's the only way to find lasting fulfillment is to follow those wild passions or those intuitive hits
Yes.
that don't make sense in the outside world, but they make sense in the inside world. And if you only follow what society is telling you to do, I mean, that's no way to create a life that you love or that, you feel excited about. It's like it's kind of a dead end road when you only follow what you're told and follow the directions. So I believe that following your heart is the best compass. And I've tried to do that even when it wasn't easy, and even if it required a risk of some sort.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of your journey as I reflect back is when you also made a conscious decision to leave Hay House, which is most people's biggest dream, and I'm sure it was at one point for you, I imagine. Um, and then to know that, like, no, I'm actually that's no longer calling me. This is, and so let me try this. Can you speak to that bridge?
Yeah, so it all happened, this goes back to your original question about leaving the corporate world,
Yeah.
because yeah, my first book came out with Hay House when I was still working in advertising. And I wrote it, every morning and every night I was, working on the book, and a lot shifted both for my professional career and my writing career around 2019, 2020. And I think that a lot of people had transformations, awakenings around that time, even if it's a bit of a rude awakening, as I know it is for so many people. I know yourself included, myself included.
Yeah, yeah.
And basically, I was feeling stuck. I was feeling like I was wearing clothes that no longer fit me, like going into to the office and day in and day out working this corporate job that I no longer felt excited about. It kind of felt like there was just a dead end. Like it felt like everywhere, the more I tried to push, the more I was just banging my head against a brick wall. And
Mhm.
it's like I just felt like I was at a loss for how to proceed.
Mm,
And it was really an act of surrender to
mm,
stop trying and stop trying to, you know, climb the corporate ladder. And at the same time, it was also kind of this inner rebellion against being like a self-help type author. So at the time I'm juggling like I'm a corporate professional, and I'm also like the self-help Hay House author. And both of them felt like it was a dead end.
mm,
And this was like right around the time when COVID happened and like the world turned upside down.
mhm,
And what happened was when I surrendered and I stopped fighting and I stopped trying and I stopped trying to force and push my way forward, I surrendered. And I believe that when you surrender to the universe, that's when there's a moment of grace that happens.
mm,
And it's like when you stop trying to push your way forward and you finally relax into where the universe is trying to
mm,
push you,
mhm,
um, that's a moment of grace. So I started writing poetry again,
mm,
and I started to connect with my inner artist.
mhm,
And I didn't want to be a self-help writer. I didn't want to be a corporate professional. I just wanted to make art, and I wanted to provide a deeper value to the world that
mm,
I felt was something that was trying to come out of me. And
mm,
that's when all this poetry started flowing out of me, and also memes. And I started to play around with memes as poetry, and memes as an art form, and memes as a form of communication, and to express different spiritual ideas or philosophical ideas. For me, it was really returning to what I was like as a child,
mhm,
when I was just making art, writing poetry. And it was that returning to that inner child, that inner artist,
mhm,
that I finally felt like I was wearing clothes that fit me,
mm,
and I just I felt like I was just shedding this I was like the snake shedding its skin.
Hmm.
And I just think that's so important. And that's a that's a that's a trend that I've noticed in so many of the artists that I admire is just the willingness to shed their skin when it no longer fits them
Hmm.
and to shapeshift and to embody a new form. Because I think that change is natural. I think that we're often so afraid to change because people expect certain things from us and we're known as this and that, and what will people think if we change? And I just believe that change is our natural state. It's actually unnatural not to change. So
Mm.
I've always tried to embrace change even when it's difficult, and I think that's the best way to stay young, stay fresh, stay inspired, and to
Mm.
just align with your own deepest purpose.
So good. So was that about the same time? I want to come back to your awakening in a moment. But was that the moment that you started Words Are Vibrations on the gram?
It was. I mean, that I've had the same Instagram account for many, many years, but it's changed names and many times.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it was the name of my first book is Shit Your Ego Says.
Yes.
So my Instagram name was Shit Your Ego Says.
Mm.
And that just no longer resonated. Like it's kind of funny. I kind of like the humor of it, but I also became very sensitive to the vibrations of those words. So like it's my
Yes.
name, but I've got the word shit and the word ego in the name. Even though it's kind of a joke, it is a vibration.
Yes.
So I set out the intention to change the name. I didn't know what I would change it to. And then one day out of nowhere, the words are vibrations just popped into my head and I just changed it without even thinking about it. And I haven't looked back.
Well, I don't know if you would ever need to, but I also get that you are a man who loves to embrace change. So who knows? I love it,
True.
right? As we continue to evolve, then we just listen to the calls. And that was actually a really beautiful conversation. There was a thread that you had with one of my favorite shamans, Allison Charles.
Mm,
Yeah, she's scheduled on the show for this month actually.
cool.
But and it was all around remember sacred reciprocity and of like answering the call and then honoring the call, then you get more of the call, right? Like honoring by that action that's in integrity with the divine, not small self, right? Like so is that the surrender that you're referencing for those listening, right? Who are typically older than you, women who might need more security at a certain season in life than they think they do, all right? And that's really the shift right now. So, just speaking into openings for my listeners to begin to contemplate that this is available for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like first of all, I feel like we can only teach what we have first learned. And I feel like for me, and when I look back on my life, I was always interested in writing, poetry, and I would always study that. So I was kind of, you know, learning and studying my whole life. And that even got into like meditation and yoga and
Mm-hmm.
plant medicine and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that like it's so important just to, before you make any big changes, just to really explore the possibilities that life has to offer and see where your heart is being called to go. And and I'm a big believer in just exploring and treating life like an adventure.
Yeah.
So I think you need to try a lot of things and learn a lot of different things to see to realize what your purpose really is,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me I think it comes naturally. I think it is what I think our emotions are our compass, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's like an intellectual thing where it's like, what can I do differently? How can I do X, Y, and Z differently? Or I want to be more like Michelle, or I want to be more like James.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everyone has their own unique calling and their own unique path.
Yes.
So for me, I think for me, my emotions have always been my compass, where it's been like, where does my heart want to go? And
Mm-hmm.
first start by immersing yourself in that world. and
Mm.
just, it's never for me, it's never quite what you want it to be. It's like I want to be a Hay House author. Well, it
Yeah.
turns out I didn't.
Right.
I wanted to be a self-help author. It turns out I didn't. Or I wanted to be an advertising professional. It turns out I didn't. But I kind of needed to go on that journey to find my way. So I'm a
Hmm.
big believer in just following where your heart wants you to go and being open to the twists and the turns that life presents to you. And I'm such a big believer in intuition and in following your intuition.
Mm.
And for me, the more I think about intuition, I believe it's more about a physical sensation. It's about a feeling and an energy that is in the body, not in the head.
Yes.
But whenever I want to make a decision, I always try to tune into my body and see what is
Mm.
my energy saying,
Hmm.
and stop analyzing everything with
Mm.
your conscious mind, but just sit with your feelings and maybe practice meditation and see where you're being drawn to go and using that to guide you.
Oh, so good. It's so beautiful. Last night I was working with my altar, which is basically my entire living room media console. It's where my television once was, but hasn't existed for almost 3 years. But and a thought came, and it was, you're not here to quiet any thoughts, right? You're here to actually see what's there and to allow for it to exist so that I can feel it and heal it and alchemize it. And then who knows what, I'll be guided to do with it, or if anything at all. Sometimes it's just to allow it to be, right? Other times it's to transmute it and redirect it, or but yeah, it's so, so good. I love that. I want to circle back to your awakening because this is part of a book that I'm also writing. And these are the moments that I don't think are spoken about publicly enough. Do you remember the exact moment, that sort of aha? I don't know if it was an initiation or if it was a series, or for me, it just kind of happened in a conversation at a high-end business mastermind in Sedona. And she said one thing which I look back on and I know that was her opening the door. I courageously chose to walk through it, and my life was forever changed. And then, of course, the real work was the next. Well, we're still here; it's endless. But do you remember that finite moment for yourself? And if so, like how you would describe it when life changed on a dime for you and perception of reality?
I mean, there's been I feel like there's been a lot of micro moments.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think that sometimes life does change in a moment, and like people have this big fork in the road moment.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I had that. I feel like it's been more of it can also happen gradually,
Yeah.
where, one little hit at a time. Definitely been a few. I mean, one was when I moved from Minnesota to New York City,
Mm.
and I was struggling to find my grounding, and Hurricane Sandy hit the city,
Mm.
and I had just signed a lease for my first apartment, and it was destroyed,
Mm.
and I became homeless, and I
Oh.
was already running out of money, and I didn't have a job because I just took a leap of faith and moved to New York because I felt like I needed to do that, but I
And you
didn't
were
really
how
have.
old?
I was in my late 20s.
Okay, so young, Saturn return time. All right.
Exactly.
Woo, yeah, feeling into that one for you.
And I really didn't know where to go or what to do, and I didn't
Hmm.
know where to stay.
Mm.
And my friend invited me. He had a friend who had this empty beach cottage on this little island in the Caribbean called Culebra.
Wow.
And we were both displaced from the hurricane. So I basically spent my last money on a one-way ticket to Puerto Rico. And then we transferred to this little rinky-dink plane to go to this island of Culebra. And I sort of proceeded to have a nervous breakdown. But it was just a moment where I felt like I was a failure. I
Mhm.
didn't know what was next on a daily basis. I didn't know when I would get off the island. I don't know if I would ever return to New York City. And
Mm.
I could not see the path forward at all.
Mm.
And for me, it was a big lesson in surrender,
Mhm.
where instead of avoiding the uncertainty, to actually lean into the uncertainty.
Mm. Mm.
Which it sounds so simple, but it's such a hard thing to do, to lean into the uncertainty
Yeah.
and to find trust when there's nothing to trust.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I think this is truly where you can be in a position to be guided when you let go of control and you
mhm,
surrender. So I
mm.
was just sitting on the beach day in and day out, watching the tide go in and out. I had nothing else to do. And and that's when I started to notice that all my fears and insecurities that I was dealing with were all the voice of my ego.
Mm,
But the longer I sat and just observed the ocean and observed my own thoughts and sat in that stillness, that I began to tap into the voice of my intuition, which
yeah.
was again more of a feeling than a thought.
Mhm.
And that's where I had the idea for my first book, Shit Your Ego Says.
Of course. Perfect.
Right. So what I
Yeah.
thought was this worst thing that ever happened to me, and it was this, you know, it really was like a dark night of the soul, but it was in that dark night that I found the treasure,
Mm,
which led me to being a published author
yeah.
and really launching a whole new life path for me.
Mm,
So it's really in the darkness
mm,
that we find the treasure. It's
yeah.
like we don't want to go into that darkness because it's so unknown and scary, but it's really we have to that's part of the journey, and
Mhm,
that's where we find, I think that we find our greatest treasure in our darkest moments.
mm.
So that's one example for me where it propelled me on a whole new trajectory.
Totally relate. And I have a feeling a lot of our listeners and viewers on the YouTube, which is a newer channel for us, but I imagine there's a lot of resonance here. I'm curious, because here's what I love about words are vibrations, like everything. But one of the things that's really present right now is you say what you feel, you say what you know, you say what needs to be said, but yet there's no it's not obvious like what you know or what you're taking a stand for or embodying, right, as a steward and a way shower of the new renaissance that you speak about so regularly, and we're going to go there in a sec. But when was the moment that you realized we are in fact living in a matrix, and then to become the glitch that you would like to see in the matrix, which of course is one of my very favorite memes of yours?
Oh goodness.
I know.
When did I realize we were living in a matrix? Probably when I started watching Terrence McKenna videos on YouTube.
So a long time ago, because I know he's one of your all-time faves. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think so much changed during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I think that we're still in the precipice of a lot of change yet to come. But I
Oh
think that
yeah.
was the first wave of
Mhm.
some big um seismic shifts, both internally for so many of us and for
Mhm.
the outside world. I don't know. I feel like there was a moment during that. It's like to get a little cosmic here for a second.
Please,
Like,
we're all the woo over here. Yes.
I don't know. I feel like like the simulation just like cracked open at that time.
Hmm. Yes.
Um, I don't know how else to explain it. I feel like there was so much happening and there was a lot of evil being revealed.
Mhm.
Like this deeply rooted systemic evil that exists in our world and that infiltrates so many of our systems,
Yeah.
political and economic and otherwise, right? And I think we saw that very clearly for the first time, so many of us,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But I feel like we also saw the light cracking through,
Yes.
and we saw the
Mm.
potential for what the world could look like.
Mm.
Because I think you have to, how do you remove sickness? You need to get to the root of it. You
Yeah.
can't just treat the symptoms.
Right. That's
You
the
need to get to
old.
the root of it.
Mm.
So to get to the root of it, you need to see how bad it really is.
Yeah.
Just like in our own lives, right? Sometimes you need to see how out of alignment you are with your purpose and be like, what am I doing with my life? Like I wasted the last 10 years
Hmm.
And like you didn't, but like you might feel that way for for a moment,
Hmm.
and might think like, um, I need to change everything. But you need to face that moment and see how out of alignment things are in order to begin that change. So I think that the universe truly is, you know, the yin and the yang. It truly is the darkness and the light. And
Hmm.
it's a balance of it all. So I think that um I don't know, I just really started questioning the nature of reality during that time. And like I said, watching a lot of Terrence McKenna videos and reading Terrence McKenna interviews where he would just, you know, just pick apart the nature of reality. And it's like, what is this reality that we live in?
Hmm.
You know, um, how does it all work? And especially like, you know, where do aliens fit in? And like
Yeah.
all these questions, right? And it's just,
Mhm.
um, and I personally, I found memes to be the only way I could talk about it. Because what we're talking about here is not something that's so easy to explain or like to give a lecture about because it's a mystery.
Totally.
It's for me it's really about holding space for the mystery.
Mm.
And that's similar to surrendering to the unknown and leaning into the uncertainty
Mhm.
is just honoring the mystery around us
Mm.
because the best scientific minds in the world cannot even begin to explain where consciousness comes from
Mhm.
or what is the energy that's fueling the sun.
Right.
These are questions that we gloss over. You know, we talk about the Big Bang
Mhm.
and we pretend that that explains where the universe came from, but the
Mhm.
Big Bang doesn't explain anything because
Exactly.
where did the Big Bang come from? What happened
Right.
before the Big Bang? It's like
Yeah.
that is a miraculous moment that we just gloss
Mhm.
over.
Right.
um, so I just think it can be daunting to question the nature of reality, but for me it's also interesting and exciting and I found memes because memes are such a there's such a this kind of existential, sarcastic. You can say things without saying them.
Yes.
There's a certain nuance and subtlety and absurdity and humor to memes that
Yeah.
I found it to be a format that was helpful for my own process into creating art about, you know, this mystery that we live in.
Yeah. And it's so comforting. I remember when I first found your account, which was in 22, so not that long ago, early 22, right? When I was supposed to find it, I did. And I've seen it grow quite a bit in this past 18 months for sure. And it's just getting started is the way that it feels for me, just as an observer. But where I found great comfort is like, these are my people, right? The ones who got it, right? Who honored it, who resonated with it. And even those who didn't, I'm like, and they're my people too. Like, it was like, we're in a conversation that I believe is the most important conversation that we could be having because you spark curiosity and intrigue, deep insight. It's everything, and yet it's almost like it's true art. It's up for interpretation. It's so incredible. And I just want to say
Thank
thank
you.
you because in the moments when I would be in a dark, 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 season, I would find your account, and I would just find words of hope and resilience and transmutation that really helped me, and I know have for so many. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, you know, I think that I what I try to do with my work and my writing is restore our relationship to the language of poetry.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, you know, um, there's a certain there's a certain nuance and the ability to, you know, it sparks poetry tends to spark more questions than it does answers. So for me, it's about we I think we're at a place in society where our language and our collective dialogue is overly literal and certain.
Yeah.
And it's like turn on the news and I don't care if it's right or if it's left or even if it's like, you know, this certain literalism that I find in a lot of spirituality where things are very literal or like because when you take language too literally, that's where dogma comes from,
Mm.
right? And I think like I think the origin of every religion was poetry
Mm.
or mythology,
Yeah.
right? It's metaphor, it's
Yes. Yeah.
storytelling. Um, as one of my favorite books, the Tao Te Ching says,
Mhm.
the Tao that can be named is not the real Tao,
Yes.
right? And Tao is
Yeah.
kind of another word for God. It's like as soon as you try to label God too specifically, it 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 no longer works. That becomes dogma. It becomes too literal. So I think that poetry is the other end of the spectrum where it's speaking the language of metaphor and I think that's the only way because I think we're stuck in this game of argumentative absolutes where everyone is so certain of this idea, but then on the other side, everyone is so certain of this idea. And that certainty just clashes up
Hmm. Hmm.
with each other.
Hmm.
So for me, I'm interested in my work is to like move the collective consciousness and
Mm.
soften our own thinking,
Yeah.
our overly logical, overly analytical, and our attachment to certainty. We're so attached to certainty
Mm.
that we just jump to these conclusions and we get entrenched in our ideology. And
Mm.
it's like, for me, that's a problem that language can solve. Because if you
Mhm.
soften our language and you learn to speak the language of poetry and myth and metaphor,
Mhm.
then suddenly it's more of a cosmic dance than it
Mm.
is this war of argumentative absolutes.
Yeah, you're speaking to something that I'm relating to, but in my own unique way. Because to be honest, before I read an advanced copy of your brand new book that's coming out, what next month? Is it February?
February, yeah.
Woohoo! And we'll link to that, The Art of You, the essential guidebook for reclaiming your creativity. You describe the book is about breaking down old paradigms that may have been holding you back in both life and creativity. And when I saw that, my first thought was, I'm not a creative. I'm not an artist. What do you mean, James? The art is me. And then the more that I had the honor and privilege of reading it, and I was like, whoa, I totally get it in a new level. And then I could actually honor my journey of the last 2.5 years of not really knowing how it makes sense, not knowing where it's all going. Do I still dress that way? Wait, I thought I was supposed to dress differently, right? All these things, right? That I know many are navigating in their inner world. But I was like, oh, yeah, even those call to actions, because I open up programs and retreats and things like that, experiences, right? But it would be so absolute of like, this is what will happen when you do or when you don't enroll. And I was like, that is not the language anymore. It's like, hey, it's here if you feel called. There's 2 more seats. And I love it if it aligns with you. And it's a softening in the language. And I found, because I was blessed by a very beautiful, abundant year, like that's effective, that lands there. That's a language and an essence that's got sort of a texture, if you will, that I think feels more familiar. It's a remembrance of more collaboration and less control and domineering and exclusivity and more inclusivity, which is exactly how you describe the principles in the new Renaissance. So I want to actually switch gears, but it was kind of a dovetail. I'm so blown away by what you wrote, and we're probably going to have to wait for my listeners to read the book. But high level, what is the new Renaissance? And then we'll go from there because I have some questions for you around it.
Yeah, great question. So I'll start by just saying that, and one of the messages of the book is that creativity is human nature.
Yeah.
And when we suppress our creativity, we're suppressing our own nature. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is like we are all designed to create. Like we have intuition and imagination, which are portals to other dimensions where we can tap into
Yes.
new ideas, right?
Yes.
And then
James,
we
speak. Yes.
then we have these brains that can strategize and plan and learn how to craft things and these amazing human bodies with hands and fingers and thumbs. You know how rare a thumb is in the animal kingdom? It's incredibly rare. And this gives
Mm.
us the ability to craft and shape
Mm.
and type and
Mm.
write things into existence.
Mm.
Um, so for me, art is not about, we think of art like, oh, it's an oil painting or it's a watercolor or it's a sonnet, and it's like, well, these are all just forms of art and they're all, frankly, old forms of art. Art is anything that you can imagine and bring to life with the power of your own creativity and ingenuity. That could be a business, it could be a podcast, that could be an awesome dinner party.
Mhm.
It could be a relationship. And relationship is something that you build and create and nurture in
Mm,
the same way that you create art.
mm,
Even your career, the decisions you make in your career, are you making them out of fear or are you making them out of curiosity and exploration?
mm.
So for me, creativity at its core is the sovereignty of consciousness. Because what's the opposite of creativity? It's reactivity. So
Mm,
are you reacting to everything that's happening around you
mhm,
and just following the crowd and following the orders of a broken society,
mhm,
right? Or are you tuning into your own intuition to see what your soul wants to birth into reality?
mm,
So for me, the new renaissance is all of us reclaiming that sovereignty of our own consciousness
mm,
so we can build new solutions. And it's more needed than ever, I believe, because the world, it's as far as I can tell in my lifetime, it's never been more broken when we look at the political systems, the economic systems, the environmental issues we're facing. Um, and things are changing so rapidly with technology and artificial intelligence. It's
mm,
like, how do you navigate through all of this? And I think it's a call for us all to contribute in our own unique way, whatever that looks like.
mm.
And I think we all are equipped to contribute in our own unique way. So for me, that's what the new Renaissance is because the first Renaissance that happened when in Europe, when Europe was going through what we call the Dark Ages.
Yep.
It was not a good time. It was like there was famines and plagues, and there was this dogmatic
Mhm,
um, adherence to the Catholic Church, and there
mhm,
were burning witches, and it was just humanity was not flourishing.
mm,
And it was the philosophers and the thinkers and the artists who what they actually did was they looked back through history and looked at the ancient Greeks and they resurrected some of the ideals and principles of ancient Greece into their own art.
mm,
And what that led to was not just a flourishing of creativity and art, but a flourishing of culture.
mm.
Um, you know that that lasted hundreds of years, and so for me, I think that the visions of the artist are like seeds that are planted in the collective consciousness,
Mm,
and artists are the trailblazers and the innovators.
mm,
And I think only new thinking can solve old problems.
mm.
Um, so for me, I think that we're ripe for a new renaissance, and it starts with people just aligning with their own purpose and learning how to bring that purpose into reality.
Yeah, and what about those who may be listening, but I know anyone anywhere has these thoughts because it was so ingrained in us from that self-help movement that is all of the 3D and definitely in disillusion, I believe, as we currently speak on some level. Um, it was so hammered into us, right? You got to know your purpose or, you suck. Life is not worth living for. And then it just became this endless loop and vicious cycle of hunting for the purpose, aiming, striving, which is all ego. So for those who still just a little lost, would benefit from some guidance on where's that first sort of opening to begin to tune into our unique purpose.
Mm-hmm. So for me, when I think of my own creative process,
Mhm.
there's no agenda at the beginning of the creative process. There's no
Mm.
agenda. There's no I need to do this. Because I think what you're referring to is sort of like it's a stage of awakening, right? So
Yes.
like if you're in that corporate rat race
Yeah.
and then you are easing out of that and you're
Mm.
like, okay, I'm tapping into my spirituality, it's time to find my purpose, but you're still bringing over some of the residual mindsets of that corporate world, which is like purpose is the new carrot that's in front of you that you're chasing.
Yes, yes.
And if your purpose isn't as clear as whatever authors and speakers that you are following, then you're going to feel inadequate and insecure. So it's kind of like taking the capitalist, corporate mindset and then just like superimposing it over the spiritual journey.
Yes, yes.
And like I'm saying, like that's not there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's a stage of awakening.
Hmm.
But I think that the next stage is going to be closer to the creative process where it's exploration without agenda.
Yes.
That's how I feel. So like, and my best ideas work this way where ideas just pop into my head when I least expect it,
Hmm.
or if I try to do something, it might not work. But if I let something come through me, then it ends up working better. And the
Hmm.
ideas that just pop into my head are better than the ones that I obsess about.
Hmm.
So for me, it's about being a vessel for what's trying to come through
Yeah. Hmm.
and not judging it against any other standards of quote unquote perfection or success, right? Everyone's journey looks different. And
Hmm.
if you're trying to compete with the people around you, it's never going to work.
Hmm. Yes,
So
yes.
just following that just that curiosity and putting one foot in front of the other and making it playful.
Mm.
It's like when you're exploring, you're just finding new things. It's like you
Hmm.
don't have an agenda. You're letting yourself be a vessel for spirit to work through you.
Yes,
And
yes.
and that's what I try to do with my own art. And I feel like that also applies to finding your purpose in life.
So beautifully said. It reminds me actually of this really great speech that Elizabeth Gilbert made on one of Oprah's stages at some point way back. And it was basically the curiosity of a hummingbird. Did you ever hear that?
I don't remember.
It was so good, but it's that. It's like we were raised, right, and programmed to think that we have to, go to college and get married and have one job for 40 years. But what about all the hummingbirds that get a little nectar here and a little nectar there and just explore, right, and allow themselves to be curious? And um, that's what I've allowed for myself because my journey looks very different than how I thought it would be than others. I've definitely had thoughts of, am I behind? Wait, no, that can't be true. You can never be behind. Like, right, just really getting clarity around the thoughts that like to roll around in the head. So thank you for offering that. You beautifully spoke about the new Renaissance, and I know that you speak deeply into that in your upcoming book. So we'll link to that for sure. But you also speak about true leadership within this realm. Can you describe what that means, and or is there a distinction in these? This is basically two in one, if you can track it. New Renaissance between New Earth, because I also know that you had a poem downloaded in you, and I was like, oh, I'm curious. I see these are the principles for New Renaissance, but how does that, or does it have anything to do with what so many people are talking about as New Earth, which already exist, in my view? But yeah, wherever you want to pick up on that, elaborate or dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think that for me, the new Renaissance is the new Earth, or the new Renaissance is the launching point for New Earth.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, it's how you get there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess for what that means, well, I guess what New Earth, what that term gets thrown around a lot.
Hmm.
And for me, the what it means most of all is just applying a higher consciousness to everything that we do.
Hmm.
And that includes like our supply chains, right? It
Hmm.
includes like
Hmm.
how we grow our food. It includes how we relate to each other.
Yes.
It's like, what does it look like when instead of we've history has been this long progression of just blindly reacting. It's like that's where wars originate was like, oh, your ancestors hurt my ancestors. So I'm just going to perpetuate that trauma into the future
Hmm.
by hurting your family and your people. And you see that in relationships where it's just, you know, um, unconsciously flinging trauma at each other.
Yes.
And this exists everywhere. This exists in business, where it's like the cutthroat nature of business. Everyone's just trying to get ahead. Everyone's trying to one up the competition. And you even see this in art, or it's like you're measuring things by how much it sold, and therefore then you start to engineer your creativity and your art toward those numbers so you can beat the other people, and it
Yeah.
just becomes another rat race.
Mhm.
So this it's like this mind virus has been installed
Mm.
in society, and we see it infiltrate every system and every aspect of life.
Mm.
So I feel like New Earth, and this is the beauty of it, it's nothing that we need to achieve
Mm.
or acquire, right?
Mm.
All it is removing the mind virus that tries to get us to fight and compete. It's like um even in nature, um there is I think it's the grasshopper and the lotus. Have you heard about this? Like
No.
the grasshopper and the locust are the same animal. But one is like sort of this friendly insect, and the other is this like a fighter and like a killer and like a pest.
Mhm.
And it's just depending on the environment, it can go one way or the other. So I feel like society is kind of like that, where it's like we don't need to become anything we're not. It's about removing the mind virus so we do everything in it's an even more natural way. Like I
Mm.
think that humanity is loving by nature. And
Mm.
and healing to me is not about acquiring something outside of yourself. It's about
Mhm.
returning to your own nature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what New Earth truly is, and that's the beauty of it. It doesn't require work in the sense that we think of it. It just requires to remove the excess that's keeping us from our true nature.
Hmm.
Remove
Hmm.
those control systems and those control systems that exist within our own mind. That's why I think it's so important to heal ourselves before trying to change the world.
Yes. This actually is the most beautiful full circle of that opening quote by one of your faves, right? Right. Like create a world or embody the world, right? That the old world just becomes obsolete. That's my experience. And I live in the LA area, and people are like, how could you still be there? It's an apocalypse over there. I'm like, I live in heaven on earth. I don't know about you, but I got Malibu in 10 minutes. I'm hiking the mountains almost daily. Like, I live in the most beautiful collaborative community, and it's not my forever place. I do feel that, unless there's a massive change in the next year or two. But meanwhile, I just really want to, have peace right where I am, and co-create my reality. So thank you for sharing that. Just a couple more questions as we begin to close out. All right. If the grid goes down tomorrow, which obviously we're hearing lots of, chatter about, this could be a big potential even this year, what would you do? How would you fill your time? How would you make your money? Do you know yet?
Oh no, that's a question that's really hard to answer for everyone
Yeah.
unless you're a farmer.
Yeah.
I mean, money, I think where you make your money, I think that becomes a very moot point.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the grid goes down,
Yeah.
what good is money going to do you, or like making money? I think all the rules change when that happens.
Yeah. So good.
In
Yeah.
fact, it could be, listen, that would be a terrible thing to happen, and that would cause a lot of disruption and chaos.
Mhm.
But in a way, it would be a great thing to happen
Mm.
in the long term sense, ignoring the immediate pain and panic and chaos that would ensue.
Mhm.
I think that it would necessitate a return to community.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah.
You know, I don't know how well you know your neighbors where you live. I don't know my neighbors hardly at all.
Mhm.
And that would necessitate getting to know your neighbors
Yeah. Mhm.
and sharing with them. And I think that would be so eye-opening
Mhm.
to not only to know your neighbors, but to depend on them
Mm.
and to navigate the situation together and to co-create a better alternative.
Mhm.
So the only thing that I know I would do is I would continue to meditate, and I would do my best to keep calm and keep an open mind and an open heart.
Mm.
Because speaking of leaning into uncertainty and the unknown, nothing would create more uncertainty than that, right?
Yeah.
So showing up as your best self, being calm and composed and generous and looking to, and this speaks to your question about leadership earlier as well. How could I show up and be of service?
That's it. Yeah.
Right? So it's not about how can I make money, it's how can I be of service and
Yeah.
how can I find something that I can do to be of service, to be valuable.
Yeah.
Because in that scenario, your value, quote unquote, is going to be determined by how much you are helping others,
Yeah.
right? Not how much, wealth you're accumulating.
Yeah, for sure.
So it would really reset our priorities very quickly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever may come, I mean, I've been preparing on the deepest level with the inner work, the sacred rituals, the practices, and to be into deep devotion with so much of that, which brings me to one of my very favorite memes of yours. And I'll be honest, when I first saw it, I wasn't there. And then I saw it 6 months later. I was like, I think I might be getting this. And then about a year later, it was like, oh, and it was the true measure of success is a calm nervous system. It's a fave and it gets a lot of, conversation going. A lot of people have different thoughts around that, but I so agree with you. If I'm ransacked and overwhelmed, then I'm no good to anyone. So I want to thank you for putting that meme out. As we close, is there anything that you wish you would have been asked or that you feel compelled to share as we enter into a really exciting new year?
Well, I just want to thank you for what you're doing and for having this podcast and for putting yourself out there and with your own purpose. And I want to thank everyone for listening, for being on this journey,
Mm,
and for being curious and being open-minded. Um, and I think that even by nature of you being here, by tuning in, you are you are providing a service. You are contributing. And it might,
mm,
even if you don't feel like you are contributing a lot in your place in the world, um, just it starts with a shift in consciousness. It just starts with a softening of the heart, opening up a little bit more, and even just wanting to have a bigger purpose,
yeah.
and even wanting to be of service and wanting to be more conscious. Um, it starts there. And even that is just a shift enough to make you of service to the world and to be a real contributor to so-called new earth. So
Mm,
I just want to thank everyone for being here, for listening, and
mm.
um, for being on the life journey that you're on.
Ah, beautifully said. Thank you very much. What an honor to sit with you. I wish you just the most beautiful and blessed new year. So many gifts coming your way, and I know that the best is yet to come. Thank you, James, for your time today.
Thanks, Michelle.